Alright, you're watching this video. There's 50 logical fallacies so far. Here we go. Can atheists be ethical? The answer to this question is a definite yes. Atheists are people who, whether they like it or not, have the law of God written on their hearts. Romans 2:15. They are subject to the same laws of our country and other countries, and they have a sense of right and wrong. They often work with people who are religious and have ethical standards, as well as non believers who don't. So they are exposed to all sorts of moral behavior. In addition, they often form their own moral standards based on what suits them. Besides, things like robbery, lying, stealing, etc., can get you imprisoned. So it is practical and logical for an atheist to be ethical and work within the norms of social behavior. However you want to look at it, atheists generally are honest, hardworking people. Nevertheless, some Christians raise the question, what is it to prevent an atheist from murdering and stealing? After all, they have no fear of God and no absolute moral code. The answer is simple. Atheists are capable of governing their own moral behavior and getting along in society the same as anyone else. At the risk of labeling the atheist as self-centered, it does not serve the best interests of an atheist to murder and steal, since it would not take long before he was imprisoned and or killed for his actions. Basically, society will only put up with so much of it is to function smoothly. So if an atheist wants to get along and have a nice life, murdering and stealing won't accomplish it. It makes sense for him to be honest, work hard, pay his bills, and get along with others. Basically, he has to adopt a set of ethics common to society in order to do that. Belief in God is not a requirement for ethical behavior or an enjoyable life. Ethics is a very deep subject to try to talk about here, so I'll just kind of gloss over it and mention the logical fallacy that should be obvious to all of you by now, which is circular reasoning. Just say, Romans says X is true, therefore X is true. Everyone has written on their hearts, which the heart's just an organ that pumps blood, so that phrase in and of itself has no meaning. Oh, well, it doesn't mean the actual heart, it means your spirit or soul. Then it should have said that. Or it really should have said your brain, because that's where everything is. But that's not true, because if it was true, we would observe that children automatically behave in certain ways. We wouldn't have to teach them how to behave, and they wouldn't learn from observation, which are both things that we have found to be true. That kids are basically blank slates who imitate other behavior that they see and gain information about the world through their senses. And that information forms basically how they're going to behave. But there are variables inside the brain itself that affect behavior and how the person perceives the world. They might lack certain chemicals or certain connections inside the brain and thus be unable to recognize something as being a negative action with a negative consequence. And so you have the potential for sociopath and psychopaths and all sorts of other mental differences that would not and could not exist if the law was really written in people's brains. Unless you're willing to say that it was written in there, but it got broken because of sin or something like that, which is not what Matt Slick has said in this paragraph. So there's no room for that particular excuse to be put in. For me, what stands out here is Slick is actually, for once, having a little bit of intellectual integrity by admitting that ethics isn't dependent upon any deity whatsoever. All that's required for ethics to be established is consequences. And that's it. There are consequences that we have established. So those are well known consequences. They're taught consequences. And as a result, the ethics is formulated around avoiding those consequences, which is extremely self sufficient, not self-centered, but self-aware, because you don't want X, Y, or Z bad thing to happen to you. But you might have a situation and or event, or you might be born in a certain area or have a certain type of brain that makes it so that the thing that you know has a punishment associated with it is something that you don't see as bad, like robbing a bank or something. So if you were born in a ghetto type of area and you were initiated into a gang at a very young age, and that's all you knew your entire, youth life, robbing people or banks or what have you might be something that you don't even see as being bad. It's just a thing that you normally do. And so it might come as a shock and or surprise when you're told that that thing is wrong. So if this, again, going back to the Romans thing, if that was true, then that person would automatically know what they're doing is wrong. But they don't. They have no way to know. Because they're not around that. They don't see that. But to admit that ethics doesn't require any deity at all it requires is consequences, is to essentially say that we don't need God for ethics. He doesn't say that, but he could and should have. And really, the only thing he can attempt to do is say that that's self-centered. So what? It's a minor attempt to poison the well, and I'm just going to let it slide. But this is a huge problem. How is Slick going to logically deal with the problem that you don't need God for ethics? Let's find out. On the other hand, atheist morals are not absolute. They do not have a set of moral laws from an absolute God by which right and wrong are judged. But they do live in societies that have legal systems with a codified set of laws. This would be the closest thing to moral absolute for atheists. However, since the legal system changes, the morals in a society can still change, and the morals along with it. At best, these codified morals are temporary absolutes. In one century, abortion is wrong, in another, it is right. So if we ask if it is or isn't right, the atheist can tell us only his opinions. If there is a God, killing the unborn is wrong. If there is no God, then who cares? If it serves the best interests of society and the individual, then kill. This can be likened to something I call experimental ethics. In other words, whatever works best is right. Society experiments with ethical behaviors to determine what set of rules works best for it. Hopefully, these experiments lead to better and better moral behavior. But as we see by looking into society, this isn't the case. Crime is on the rise. Oh, look, it's association causation fallacy. Haven't seen this one in a while. So crime is on the rise. Must be because not that many people believe in God anymore, which is not something that you can show a link between, because all we have to do is look at the prison population and do the math, and even if you equal it out, you would see that there are more Christians than there are atheists in the prison population. Even if you ignore the people that become Christians once they're in prison, which many people do, turn to a religion, and usually the religion is Christianity because the Christians are the most prominent people that go into prisons and preach in prisons. So, because you have a captive audience. But definitely I think the prison reform system needs to be changed, and we need prison reform. We need a different way to deal with this, but that's kind of a side issue. But if you create more laws, then and nobody knows about these laws, then more things become illegal, and thus crime will be on the rise. But what crime where? Where's the citation? Where's your documentation? What are you referring to? No idea, it's just crime is on the rise, and that's bad. And if we all just followed the system, then crime wouldn't be on the rise. But if that was true, then Christians shouldn't be in prison ever. There's only one example that I know of offhand where Christianity prevented a crime, or at least lessened the crime. There was if I can find it on YouTube, I'll link it below. But there was a video I saw where the gal behind the register that was being robbed said to the guy, "I want to tell you about the Christ that I have," and she started talking about Jesus, and the guy actually happened to be a Christian. So they established a rapport, and because of that, he either stopped committing the crime or he left. I'm not sure which. But at any rate, if that was the norm, if that was across the board always working, then you could make a case that being a Christian is a good thing because you can use it to prevent crime. But it's not. Now, maybe establishing a rapport with the person robbing you is the way to prevent crime. But I personally wouldn't risk it myself because you're putting your life on the line hoping that that person is somebody you can establish a rapport with about something. So I wouldn't risk it. Someone else, might. I don't know. But nonetheless, you don't have that as the standard. You don't have negotiators saying, "Hey, come out of the building, Jesus loves you." You don't have that happening, and you certainly don't see, Christians not doing crime. So if this idea was true that
Mr. Deconverted Man, I know this must be getting frustrating, but this season of illogical ideas is drawing to a close. But don't worry, the big one is coming.
there are potential dangers in this kind of self-established/experimental ethical system. If a totalitarian political system is instituted and a mandate is issued to kill all dissenters or Christians or mentally ill, what is to prevent the atheists from joining forces with majority system and support the killings? It serves his self-interest, so why not? Morality becomes the standard of convenience, not absolutes. Of all the different logical fallacies and poisoning of the wells that I've heard, this is by far the most despicable that I've seen. I mean, yeah, we've seen the Hitler card played before, but really, Matt Slick? Really? And this is also a loaded question because he asks a question that is loaded, preloaded to give the answer that he wants the reader to give. So, at any rate, this kind of just goes against everything we understand about how ethics are. As I said before, we, as kids, as young children, mimic the behaviors of those around us, and that essentially formulates our ethics. Although we can change them when we're older, it's hard to do that. So, there is some line that you will not cross because you will not cross that line. Yes, the person might be a coward and go along with the system, but that could apply to anybody. And to just suggest that it would just be atheists might do that, or atheists could do that, what's to stop them? That's a loaded question. Well, their ethics is what's going to stop them. And we'll find out what kind of person that person really is if that came to pass. But we could easily turn this on its head. It would still be the same logical fallacies, but we could say, well, what's to stop the Christian from doing it? After all, they could just ask for forgiveness, pretend they weren't a Christian to escape the killing of the Christians, if we're going to leave the question in the same format. And also the Christian could justify this because they have to obey the laws in the land of which they live because that's in the Bible. So what's to stop them from doing it, right? It's the same loaded question. It's the same poisoning of the well. What's to stop people from doing bad is their real ethics. And until we're in that situation, we won't know what sort of person we really are until it's tested in such a horrible way. And hopefully, none of us will ever be in that position where we have to find out, what we're really made out of. Because I would want to stand up and say no and be, either thrown in prison or killed or whatever's going to happen to me. But who knows? Maybe I think, well, by going along, I can, sneak into the system and ruin it from inside or something like that. And people have done things like that where they pretended to be on the people's side and then undermined it from within or what have you. So it's black and white sort of thinking, but nonetheless, if you're asking this loaded question of what's to prevent people from going to the system that suits them best, the real answer is themselves, and there is no other answer. And that's true no matter what your religion is, no matter what your faith is, no matter what your ethics are. It's you that decides, yes or no, I'm going to do this, period. And that probably wouldn't sit well with Slick, but it's how things are. Also, this contradicts what he said from before. If the laws are all written on our hearts, then how is it that we're able to so easily disobey them at a moment's whim? Or why is it that anybody disobeys them, really? I don't know. There's no real clear-cut answer to that question, is there? At least Flick doesn't give us one in this article. But, to be fair, just because someone has an absolute ethical system based on the Bible, there's no guarantee that he will not also join force in doing what is wrong. People are often very inconsistent, but the issue here is the basis of moral belief and how they affect behavior. That is why belief systems are so important and why absolutes are so necessary. If morals are relative, then behavior will be too. This can be dangerous if everyone starts doing right in his own eyes. A boat adrift without an anchor will eventually crash into the rocks. So we have two appeals to consequence and an argument to analogy with the whole boat anchor thing, which didn't need to be tacked on there. We got the point without that, okay? So, alright, this, other than being appeals to consequences, that is to say, if there isn't an absolute, then things will be bad, or what if everyone just starts acting the way they want to? What if that happens? Then that happens, and that's it. They're appealing to that as a potential consequence doesn't make your argument work, logically speaking. And I know this isn't a argument as much as it is an article trying to persuade people, but because it's trying to persuade people, it's a persuasionary dialogue, thus it can be analyzed as if it was an argumentation, which is what I'm doing. Anyways, he says absolutes are necessary, but then he also admits that there's no guarantee that the person following the absolute system will not do bad. So how is it that absolutes are so necessary and important? It seems to me that they wouldn't be because they don't guarantee anything. If they guaranteed something, then you'd have a persuasive argument. But you just admitted they don't guarantee anything. All you can say is the behavior will be relative if the moral is relative. Yeah, and so if you have an ethical system like utilitarian ethical system, for example, which says do the most good for the most people, the least harm to the least amount of people, you have to answer what harm is, and you also have to know what your action may or may not do to some extent, but we're limited because we're humans, so an action that's good today might actually turn out to be really, really bad down the line, and you have no idea how that's going to be. Let's just, pretend that we're somebody way back in time and we're, giving a shot that's going to cure some disease, and it happens to be that the kid that we do it to is Hitler, right? We don't know at that time that curing that disease will let somebody live that's going to become an evil person and do horrible, evil things. We're acting on the knowledge that we do have, that this is a good thing to do. Okay? And that's all we can do as humans, is act on the information that we have to the best of our abilities and say, okay, well, this is a good action that I am taking right now as far as I know. because it's helping the most amount of people. And I can see that it's helping people. And what does that mean? Well, it's benefiting them. It's providing them longer lives, more health, more freedoms, better quality food or better jobs or whatever the thing might be. And all of that could be looked at as subjective things that are, quote, good, end quote. But yeah, once you have the system there and then you start establishing what those words mean for that system, then you can say, okay, all that's tacked down inside my brain and that's going to be my system. And it might turn out that your system is something you abandon at the last minute because you're a coward. This doesn't make it useless. It just means that we're flawed. We're not perfect, and having an absolute system doesn't change that. The bottom line is that Slick's argument is that his system is better than ours, but he can't make that argument because it's simply untrue. At the end of the day, he's just as bad off as we are. I would even maybe go a little bit further. An absolute system doesn't allow for change. And if change is absolutely vital and necessary, then you either change or die, as far as a system goes, not necessarily as an individual or a group. So systems that don't change will die off. Wait a minute, why am I telling him this? Yeah, keep the same system that you've been using. Keep insisting that everyone uses the same system. That way it will die off and we won't have to deal with it anymore. Cha-king! The heck does cha-king mean? That doesn't make sense. Moving on. The Bible teaches love, patience, and seeking the welfare of others, even when it might harm the Christian. In contrast, the atheist presuppositions must be consistently changing and subjective, and do not demand love, patience, and the welfare of others. Instead, since the great majority of atheists are evolutionists, their morality, like evolution, is the product of purely natural and random processes that become self-serving.
It's all Matt Slick's fault. I blame Matt Slick for this. I blame Matt Slick for this.
Circular argumentation. Poisoning of the well, and appeal to consequence. Irrelevant and association causation fallacy, as well as a non sequitur, poisoning of the well, and straw man. So that's 8. 8 in a row. Whatever. Moving on. Basically, atheists cannot claim any moral absolutes at all. To an atheist, ethics must be variable and evolving. This could be good or bad, but with human nature being what it is, all opt for the moral absolutes based on God's word, and not on the subjective and changing morals that atheism offers. Appealing to consequence times 1, 2, 3. And circular reasoning. So, yeah. Alright. And false dichotomy. There. So that's 4. 4 more there. At least we're done. So, that's it. I have nothing left to comment on. I mean, it's wrong. All of it. It's just wrong. How do I explain how wrong it is without taking even more time and being even more boring to people? I don't know. There is no answer to that question. It's wrong. In every sense of the word that it could be wrong. It's wrong. So talk about morals and ethics in the comments or whatever. I don't care. Lobsters, just whatever you want, because anything goes. Yeah, unless and until the face palms cause us, then we must continue to be bored by Matt Slick and stuff, I guess. Throw money at me if you love me on PayPal. Thanks a lot. Listen to love, like, and share, and plus, and do all that stuff, or not, or whatever you want to do. It's all fine. It's all subjective.